Imagine living in a peaceful neighborhood, enjoying your lake view and boating on the weekends, only to be told that the HOA wants you to move your boat. At first, it sounds like a simple request, right? But this wasn't just about a boat, it was about control, power, and standing up for what's yours. Little did they know, the HOA picked the wrong fight. I didn't just back down. I fought back, and in ways they never saw coming. What started as a demand to move my boat escalated into a battle that would shake the entire community. So, grab a seat and listen closely, because this is a story you won't believe, how a simple boat became the battleground in a war that changed everything. It all started when I received the first letter from the HOA, stating that I had violated one of their many obscure rules. They claimed my boat was too close to the shoreline and demanded I move it immediately, or face fines and penalties. I couldn't believe it. I had been keeping my boat there for years without any issues, and all of a sudden, they decided to play the authority card. The audacity. They didn't even provide clear reasoning, just a vague set of rules that seemed to be made up on the spot to target anyone they didn't like. But I wasn't about to let that slide. I had worked hard to build my life here, to own my piece of the lake, and now they were trying to take that away from me, piece by piece. I wasn't going to be bullied. As I read through the letter, I could feel my frustration rising. The HOA had done this before, picking on residents for the smallest things, imposing rules that no one could fully understand. They were like a pack of wolves, circling their prey, waiting for someone to make a mistake. But I wasn't going to be their victim. Their unreasonable demands were just the beginning. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. They were making my life miserable for something as insignificant as the position of my boat. Was this how things were going to go from now on? Would I constantly be looking over my shoulder, wondering when the next ridiculous complaint would arrive? But the problem wasn't just the boat. It was the HOA's arrogant sense of entitlement. They believed they could control every aspect of my life, down to where I parked my boat. The worst part? They knew they could get away with it. They had done it to other residents before, and nobody fought back. They were used to everyone just complying, submitting quietly. But not me. I wasn't like the others. I didn't work hard to get here only to be pushed around by a group of people who thought they could run my life. I could feel my resolve hardening. I wasn't going to back down. The more I thought about it, the more I realized, I wasn't just standing up for my boat. I was standing up for my freedom, my right to enjoy my property without interference. And if that meant going to war with the HOA, then so be it. I spent the next few days stewing over the letter, my frustration growing with each passing hour. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about my boat, it was about everything I had worked for. My peace, my property, my life. And I couldn't let the HOA trample all over it. They were testing my limits, but I wasn't going to let them win. One night, I sat on my porch overlooking the lake, staring at my boat, reflecting on how everything had led to this point. It wasn't just a boat, it was a symbol of my hard work. It was my escape, my sanctuary from the chaos of the world. But now, it was under attack. I could either give in to their demands, let them strip me of my peace, or I could fight back. And that was the moment it hit me, I wasn't going to let them take anything from me. A plan began to form in my mind. I'd spent years living under their radar, following their rules, respecting their demands. But no more. I wasn't going to be just another resident they could push around. I was going to turn the tables. I'd take a stand not just for me, but for everyone else who had silently accepted their authority. I wasn't going to back down. I walked inside and picked up my phone. The HOA didn't know it yet, but they had just made a powerful enemy. I started reaching out to neighbors, asking them about their experiences with the HOA, digging for anything that could help me build a case against them. What I uncovered shocked me. I wasn't the only one they had targeted, they had made life miserable for others too, picking off the residents one by one, knowing they could get away with it. But this time, it was different. This time, I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The more I learned, the more determined I became. I couldn't let them use their petty rules to control people's lives. I wasn't just fighting for my boat anymore, I was fighting for all of us. And I knew I had to do something drastic to make them realize they had underestimated me. It was time to fight fire with fire, to hit them where it hurt. If they wanted to make my life miserable, then I'd make sure they regretted it. I wasn't going to back down. The battle had only just begun. The moment I decided to fight back, everything changed. I wasn't going to play by the HOA's rules anymore. I was going to turn their world upside down. I started by gathering information, digging through every document I could find about the HOA's policies, looking for weaknesses or inconsistencies I could use against them. I didn't just want to win this fight, I wanted to make them regret ever crossing me. I began talking to my neighbors, and as I suspected, many of them were just as fed up with the HOA as I was. Some had received complaints about trivial things, the color of their mailbox, the height of their grass. Others were fighting battles of their own, quietly paying the fines, not wanting to rock the boat. But I wasn't going to stay silent. I started organizing a group of like-minded residents who were ready to take a stand. We met in secret, planning our next moves. We weren't just going to be the victims anymore, we were going to be a force to be reckoned with. But the real challenge came when I decided to take it to the next level. I knew that the HOA wouldn't back down easily. So, I took matters into my own hands and began disrupting their operations. I made sure the HOA's meetings were never the same. I showed up, armed with information, with facts, with examples of their mistreatment. Each time I spoke, I didn't just ask questions, I demanded answers. And I wasn't going to let them off the hook. Their power was in their ability to intimidate and silence us, but now, the tables were turning. As the weeks went by, the HOA started to realize that they were no longer dealing with an easy target. I had become the thorn in their side, the one person who refused to be silenced. And I wasn't alone anymore. The group of residents I had rallied around me grew in numbers and strength. We were united, and we weren't going anywhere. One by one, we started fighting back against the HOA's ridiculous rules. I confronted them on their policies, their arbitrary fines, their unfair treatment of residents. Each challenge we threw at them brought us closer to our goal. But the HOA wasn't going to give up without a fight. They started using their usual tactics, threatening legal action, sending threatening letters, trying to intimidate us into submission. But it didn't work anymore. We had the support of the community, and we weren't backing down. It got to a point where the HOA couldn't ignore us any longer. They tried to use their power and influence to stop us, but we had one thing they didn't: the truth. We knew that if we stood together, we could beat them at their own game. Every move they made, every letter they sent, only brought more residents into our corner. The more they tried to silence us, the louder we became. And then came the turning point, the moment that made everything worth it. We decided to take them on directly. I organized a public meeting where I confronted the HOA head-on. I had the support of every resident who had been wronged by their actions, and we all spoke out. I wasn't just fighting for my boat anymore, I was fighting for the right to live freely in my own home, without fear of being controlled by a group of people who thought they could dictate every aspect of our lives. The HOA couldn't take it anymore. They were exposed, their power shattered by the truth. In that meeting, we didn't just challenge the HOA, we destroyed their credibility. They tried to fight back, but it was clear they were losing control. And that's when I made my move. I didn't just demand that they leave me alone, I demanded that they leave the entire community alone. I made sure every resident knew that we had the power to take control of our neighborhood. And from that moment on, the HOA's grip on us started to loosen. What followed was a wave of change. The HOA could no longer bully us. The residents, empowered by the victory we had won, started speaking up, challenging every rule, every fine, every demand that the HOA tried to impose. And when the dust finally settled, we were the ones left standing. The HOA had been exposed for what they were, a group of self-appointed rulers who had no real power, only the illusion of control. The day of the final confrontation arrived, and with it, a wave of tension I couldn't shake. The HOA knew they had lost control, but they weren't ready to admit defeat. I had exposed their weakness, rallied the entire neighborhood, and shown them that the residents were no longer willing to bend. But now, they were cornered, and they would do whatever it took to protect the little power they had left. The meeting was set, and it was time to face them head-on. The HOA's board members sat in their usual positions, smug expressions on their faces, as if they still held all the cards. But I wasn't intimidated anymore. This time, I had the truth on my side, and I wasn't going to let them hide behind their lies and half-baked rules. As I walked into that room, I could feel the weight of everything I'd fought for: my property, my peace, the right to live my life without their interference. The first few minutes were tense, with the HOA board trying to assert their authority, speaking down to me as they always had. But I could see it in their eyes, the fear. They knew this meeting was different. This time, the entire neighborhood was watching, and I wasn't backing down. I started speaking, calmly but with power. I listed every absurd rule they had imposed on residents, every ridiculous fine they had tried to enforce. I brought up their illegal practices, their abuse of power, and the damage they had caused to this community. As I spoke, I could see the board members squirming in their seats, glancing at each other nervously. For the first time, they realized they weren't the ones in control anymore. Then, I dropped the bombshell. I had collected evidence, documents, emails, testimonies from other residents, proof that the HOA had overstepped their bounds. I had been keeping a detailed record of their abuses, and now, I had everything I needed to take them down. I laid it all out on the table, showing the board that their actions were no longer a secret. They had violated not only the residents' rights but also the law. They were on the verge of losing everything. The room fell silent. You could feel the air shift as the weight of the situation sank in. The HOA board members were scrambling now, trying to cover their tracks, but it was too late. Their empire was crumbling. The residents, once silent and afraid, were no longer afraid to speak up. One by one, they stood up, their voices growing stronger as they shared their own stories of being mistreated by the HOA. Each person was a piece of the puzzle, and together, we were unstoppable. As the meeting dragged on, I could see the HOA's resolve beginning to crack. They tried to argue, to deny the evidence I presented, but the truth was undeniable. Every time they tried to defend themselves, we countered with more facts, more proof of their wrongdoing. And then came the final blow. I looked directly at the HOA president, the one who had been the most arrogant, the one who had sent me the first letter demanding I move my boat. I told him, in no uncertain terms, that their reign was over. The neighborhood was united, and we would no longer be their pawns. I could see the color drain from his face. He knew it was over. The power they had held over us for so long was slipping away, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The finality of the moment was undeniable. The residents, empowered by the truth and our collective strength, were taking back control. The meeting ended with the HOA board in disarray, their credibility shattered. They had no choice but to resign. The community had won. But it wasn't just about me anymore, it was about all of us, standing together to reclaim our lives from an organization that had overstepped its bounds for far too long. Walking out of that meeting, I felt a rush of triumph. The battle had been hard, but we had emerged victorious. I looked around at my neighbors, seeing the same pride in their eyes. We had fought for something much bigger than a boat. We had fought for our rights, our peace, and our community. And we had won. The days that followed the HOA's resignation felt surreal. What had started as a battle over a boat had turned into something much bigger, a fight for control, for freedom, for the right to live without fear of constant surveillance and unreasonable rules. The HOA was no longer the fearsome authority they once were. Their grip on the community had been shattered, and we, the residents, were free to breathe easy once again. I didn't just take back my boat, I took back my peace of mind, my dignity, and my sense of ownership over my life. The neighborhood felt different now, lighter, freer. It was as though a weight had been lifted, and we could finally relax and enjoy the lives we had worked so hard to build. People who had once kept their heads down, too afraid to speak up, were now standing tall, ready to defend their rights. There was a sense of unity in the air, a bond formed through our collective struggle. We were no longer just neighbors, we were allies in the fight for our own peace. But what struck me most was the realization that this victory wasn't just about me or my boat. It was about something much deeper. It was about the power of standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem stacked against you. It was about the courage to challenge authority when it oversteps its bounds and refuses to see the truth. I had learned that sometimes, you have to be willing to face your fears head-on, to fight when others would have run, and to never give up on your right to live freely. I'd also learned that there is power in unity. When we come together, when we stand up for one another, we become unstoppable. This wasn't just my fight, it was the fight of everyone who had been wronged by the HOA's overreach. And when we stood together, the HOA couldn't hold us back. Looking back, I realized that this fight had taught me more than just how to deal with the HOA. It had taught me about myself, about my resilience, my determination, and my refusal to be intimidated. I had stood up for my rights, and in doing so, I had shown others how to do the same. We were no longer afraid. We knew that when we come together, we can take on anything. As I walked down by the lake that evening, looking at my boat, I couldn't help but smile. The lake, once a source of tension, was now a symbol of victory. It represented more than just a piece of property, it represented our ability to fight back, to reclaim what's ours, and to never settle for less than what we deserve. The HOA was gone, but the lessons I'd learned, about power, unity, and standing up for what's right, would stay with me forever. I had won the battle, but more importantly, I had proven to myself that sometimes the hardest fights are the ones worth fighting the most. And just like that, the battle was over. But this was only the beginning. The victory wasn't just about the HOA, it was about showing that no matter how powerful the opposition, standing up for what's right always pays off. It wasn't just my story, it was the story of anyone who's ever felt silenced, pushed down, or controlled. It's the story of resilience, unity, and the relentless pursuit of freedom. But the fight doesn't stop here. The HOA might be gone, but there are always new battles on the horizon. Every day, there are people out there who are ready to challenge the status quo, to fight for what they deserve, to take control of their lives. And trust me, I've got more stories coming your way, stories of ordinary people who did the extraordinary, stories of everyday heroes who found the strength to fight against the odds. You won't want to miss what's next. So, if you want more stories that will inspire you, that will make you feel like you can take on the world, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. You don't want to miss the next chapter of this journey. I'll be back with more, and trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next. And don't just watch, engage with me. Drop a comment below and let me know, what would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you ever fought back against something unfair? Let's get the conversation started because this community is all about standing up for each other, and your story could be the one that inspires someone else. So hit that bell, subscribe, and get ready for the next chapter. Because the story's not over. Not by a long shot. _